I'm not fearful. I'm obviously emotional. I'm worried about my family. I want my kids to be okay. I refuse to let anyone who had evil intentions like that stop me from doing the work that I love, stop me from being a leader of this Commonwealth and looking out for all Pennsylvanians.
Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro defiant after officials say an arsonist set fire to the governor's residence early Sunday morning. Now, the governor and his family were in the house at the time, but were evacuated safely. The fire was successfully extinguished, but it caused significant damage to the residence.
Pennsylvania State Police have arrested 38-year-old Cody Balmer in connection to the arson. Troopers say that Balmer turned himself in Sunday afternoon. He has been charged with attempted murder, arson, and terrorism. Governor Shapiro said this is the latest in a very concerning trend.
First, this type of violence is not okay. This kind of violence is becoming far too common in our society. And I don't give a damn if it's coming from one particular side or the other. We have to be better than this. And we have a responsibility to all be better.
Meanwhile, Utah's Republican Governor Spencer Cox showed support for his Democratic counterpart on X, writing, quote, "Evil is far too rampant today. As political violence continues to escalate, I pray that we will tone down the rhetoric, treat our political adversaries and fellow Americans with dignity and respect." And yes, this is a very frightening thing. No one harmed. The damage to Shapiro's residence is very extensive. If you can see those photos, I don't know if we have them to put up here. It was quite bad. So the suspect apparently brought beer bottles full of gasoline, broke in, set them on fire, said that, and then was asked by police later if he knew that people were home and could have been damaged, and he said, apparently, according to the police, he said yes, and that if he had run into Shapiro, he would have attacked him with a hammer. So this is clearly someone who was intent on doing harm, who has confessed. How tangibly related it is to political violence or rhetoric is very unclear at this point. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is probably a crazy person, certainly looks like a crazy person. I don't know that he has some really well-defined ideology or has been radicalized by a specific rhetoric or speech or what have you. We can obviously learn more about what was motivating him, but I'm very cautious always to draw clear-cut connections between, this is the rhetoric that caused. I mean, I think it's perfectly fine to say we can calm down our rhetoric, and it is a good thing, always a good practice to see someone on the other side of the political spectrum decrying violence against someone on the other side. Certainly, I'm happy to see more of that happen and for people to kind of cool it in general, but there isn't a clear-cut connection here as far as I can tell.
Right, but here's what we do know, Robby. We do know that there have been an escalation of these kinds of threats that we've seen.
Has there been?
Yes. If you look at what happened with Nancy Pelosi, there was an invasion in her home, then an assault on her husband. You look at what happened with Governor Whitmer. You look at what Congresswoman Whitmer. You look at what's also happening with members of Congress. Even in D.C., Capitol Police have documented more than 8,000 threat investigations in 2023, hundreds more than in 2022. And they are talking about the difficulty in protecting even members of Congress, because it's now extending beyond just the individual person who's in Congress to their family, to their environment. How are we going to protect them? How are we going to have enough police who are qualified and trained and who want to do this role? So I think that there has been an escalation. We're seeing it, and it's also difficult to track sometimes, like you said. Is it based on specific rhetoric or ideology? But we do know that there is an increased threat, that they're receiving more threats via email, that that we're seeing what's happening on X. We're seeing just an escalation of, is it safe? I think the question is to run for office in some cases. Is it something that people are thinking about when you look at young people and if they want to be involved in government right now, right? And do they want to put themselves out there like that and have the potential of somebody trying to come after their family? I don't think people thought about that 15 years ago.
Well, of course not. But I'd be hesitant to say, look, our elected representatives, they should not be subjected to threats of violence, certainly. It's fair to criticize them.
Sure.
And political rhetoric has always been very, very heated. There's not been I'm not going to contest the whatever statistic you're referencing there. Perhaps there
Doesn't
have
have
been
the
more.
police. Yeah.
Perhaps there have been more threats of violence investigated by the police. Most of the online kind of threats is in fact just talk and not some well thought out plan to commit violence. I don't think there's been an increase in actual attacks on members of Congress. Now, there was very famously, very infamously, an attempted political assassination that took place last year.
Right.
It was of former president at the time, Donald Trump, who was was actually shot. People behind him wounded and killed.
Assassination attempt.
That was a actual assassination attempt. Now, is that? But that's on against the right or on my side. I still wouldn't say is that because of rhetoric or there's more online discussion.
I'm just saying,
I don't really.
we've seen social media, good and bad, right? We've seen social media, what it could do for a platform, what it can do for somebody like AOC or others like Bernie Sanders. We've seen the groundswell of support that can happen. We've also seen the flip side, right, where it can get pretty nasty. What is clear though is that if you compare it to 15 years ago, what's happening to members of Congress and their families and the threats that are happening, it did not happen. It didn't happen. And so I think
because there's no social media.
That's my point.
Well, right, but I mean the height of threatened.
The hate and anger has been fueled so much that I think elected members of Congress, that there is more at stake if you decide to run. I think people actually think about it now more than they did before. Is this going to affect my family? Am I going to put my family in danger? When the Obamas were in office and the amount of racist attacks that have happened and the threats that were happening. If you work inside of the White House, if you're reporting inside of the White House, every once in a while it's completely shut down because somebody is outside the White House trying to do something, what we just saw potentially with Governor Shapiro. So I think we would be remiss to even say that there hasn't been an escalation. There's clearly been an escalation if you look at all of the members of Congress. And if you talk to them, they'll tell you that too. That even if media doesn't get a hold of it, that it's happening.
Well, yes, there's been an escalation in that it is now possible to threaten people via social media, and that was not the case 15 years ago because there was no social media. We've still gone through periods of extreme violence. There was a lot of political, I would say, rhetoric, and there were fire bombings of mailbox bombings of government buildings, right, throughout the 60s and 70s. There were political assassination, Martin Luther King, Robert F. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, all of that in an era before social media or this ease of communication. The height of political assassinations in the Western world was the late 1800s to the early 1900s.
Right, but the access now is different. The access now is different. Even knowing where their whereabouts are, you can see so much more because everything's documented. It's on social media. It's in their calendar. And so if somebody wants to do harm, it's just you have more access to do so, is my point. And I think that there's a lot of fear and anger that came with that social media. Whether this person did it because they don't like, this suspected arsonist does not like what Governor Shapiro stands for, that's a whole other matter. We don't know those details yet. That's a matter of time. Probably will come out in a police report eventually why this person decided to do what they decided to do. But we do know, again, looking back at Nancy Pelosi and looking back at just other people who have been in harm's way.
Well, look, if our elected representatives, governors, leaders need more security, better protection, I agree with that. We absolutely
100%.
need to. We can't live in a country where the people running our country are routinely threatened by not just edgy or angry rhetoric online, but actual crazy people entering their homes. We cannot have that, and we need whatever protection to prevent that, to prevent actual assassination.
Right. So then the next question, I know we've got to wrap soon on this, but this is certainly an interesting topic. I think the next question is the challenge with recruiting high-quality candidates for policing is a whole nother topic because there's a lot of folks who don't want to be in policing like they did 50 years ago. And so the pay has to go up. Where you live matters with policing. A lot of them are trained in one area and then go to another. So how are you going to protect our elected members of Congress if you don't have quality?
Well, on that subject, I know a lot of conservatives will say that part of the reason people don't want to become police officers is it's become stigmatized in the era of Black Lives Matter and criminal justice reform and
reform
George
was
Floyd
needed.
and all of that.
Like I said, another topic, another day. But reform was needed, and I think there are some stigmas that come with it. But I think if you pay people well, you know what, a lot of people who are high-quality candidates will come through the door. But right now, I don't know if that's the case.
Well, next up, the battle over real ID continues. Is it crucial to public safety or is it government overreach? You can probably guess what I have to say, but we'll discuss it. Stay with us.